to all. Thank you for inviting me to this. I have a few things I want to fess up to in advance. I find these things kind of interesting, presenting in front of people who are more experts in the field than I am. I would say that whilst I do a lot in the data world, I'm very much more of a strategist than a practitioner. So you're going to know a lot more than me. So hopefully this won't be too bad for you. But what I want to take you through is a journey, and a journey that's related to AI, and really kind of goes into getting you to think about things. I'm looking forward to the questions that come out of it. What I'll also do is there is a research paper, and I write my research papers overtly in collaboration with AI, that I'll put together and I'll give to Ed. So there's a bit more detail around this because there's a relatively short amount of time. So let me just very quickly introduce me before I plow on with these things. My name's Kurt Roosen. You'll see on that first slide a bit of a giveaway that I'm not as talented a graphic designer as these slides imply. And therefore this was done by Gemini Slides AI, not the content, but the actual formation. And it decided to put a little bracket after my name. Who knows why? Trying to create its own emoji, but there you go. I have been involved with the BCS for a number of years. I've been on council twice, a trustee. I was actually a chair of council for 2 years. So that's what gives me a little bit of access to you, and some history of why I'm connected to the BCS. But in my latest job, the thing that I've done most recently, I was head of innovation for a part of the Isle of Man government, the digital agency. And in that, and we'll mention it very briefly in here, constructed something called data asset foundations, which have a place to play in some of the things I'm presenting here. But I hope you'll appreciate the fact that I was in the government for 3 years, and I will say, although not much more, I did have more hair when I started. And anybody who's in government or around it will appreciate that the words innovation and government don't tend to sit as good bedfellows. So I had my challenges along the way. But hopefully I'll give you an outline here that will create some interest. As I say, what I'm trying to do is spark a conversation. So let's talk a little, if it will let me move on to slide 2, what we're going to talk about here. So 4 pillars. First, we're going to look at how AI is transforming unstructured data, taming what we call the dirty data problem and creating new synthetic data. Second, we'll look at the new frontier of data privacy, and some of the issues that go around this, moving past confused terminology to achieve privacy preserving connectable data. That's a bit of a tongue twister. But ultimately, the things that we're trying to merge here are not just quality, but how quality merges into data privacy, and how we put those two together. Third, we'll look at some real case studies, contrast them with critical risks that the technology introduces, and namely things that will turn AI-based re-identification and bias amplification. We talk a lot about bias in AI. Hopefully when we get to the end of this, what I'll give you is the balance between bad bias and good bias. We tend to forget that we can actually create positive things out of bias. There is positive bias as well as negative, and the same applies to AI. And finally, I'll conclude with a strategic framework and kind of look a bit at the future and some of the potentials that are out there to solve some of the problems we're coming up with. So let's dive in a little. Foundational challenge that we have. Dirty data. We all look at data from a quality perspective. We all look at it to say, how can we make it better? And I'll qualify this with a bit of history, if you like. So when I went to university back in the 18th century, the things that were prevalent at that time were these newfangled concepts of relational databases. So my Bible was a book by Dayton Codd, and normal forms were the way that you put stuff together. And it was just interesting. I was looking at normal forms, and I actually asked AI to list the normal forms of relational databases, and it came up with three. And I remember from my schooling that there were actually seven. So I went back to AI and said, I thought there were seven normal forms for databases. And it came back and says, actually, you're right. But the three are the ones that most people do. So interestingly, the facts were right there. It knew that there were seven of those, but it decided to apply a context to simplify it, which actually I didn't want. And that is kind of a part of the problem with AI, is it applies its own context in there. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail. But one of the things to think about very carefully is that the AI creates a paradigm shift. We move from, as I was looking at relational databases, so I've spent at least the first half of my 30-odd year or nearly 40-year career looking at how to structure data, looking at how to make it as clean and tidy and connected as possible, but doing that with some very defined rules. What I'm finding in the last couple of years is actually the ability to structure unstructured data is unparalleled. And my whole thinking about how you construct data, how you try and make it as solid and connected as possible, is up for challenge. And it's up for challenge in lots of different ways. So we have to start thinking about what AI can do for us in helping us achieve results that, to be fair, over many, many years, we found very difficult to do. And the dirty data is that core one. And also you have to remember in that applying it to unstructured data, that there is this inference that AI has a capability to go through and infer things. So we're not just focusing now on what the data is, the bits and bytes. We are focusing on that context. We are looking at what AI can do to infer things, to look at patterns that we may not have seen before. Now that creates both opportunities and challenges. So let's make that a bit concrete. AI-driven cleansing use cases, smart schema enforcement. An AI clustering algorithm can automatically identify New York and NY are the same thing. And actually, if you use any sort of AI chat, then you'll find that spelling things incorrectly makes very little difference. It will figure out what you wanted to say from the context of what's around it. Now that's very different from us looking at data cleansing and applying rules around it, because we're trying to think up those rules in advance. AI has that ability to do that on the fly. So it moves from cleansing to interpretation. LLMs can classify billions of free text entries. An example is warranty claims. And it doesn't necessarily need a predetermined training set to do that. You don't have to tell it what to do. It can figure that out in its own right. The problem comes is whether it does that well or not. And that's where we have to think very carefully. And the ultimate application, those are learning things, so those are more related to machine learning than anything else, is generation. So there's a lot of applications, particularly in things like healthcare, where instead of relying upon the doctor's notes that people can never read, the AI agents can listen to that, and it can generate new, clean, structured data from that raw audio. Now that's a game changer. It's a positive thing. However, what we have to look at is not just the quality of data now, but the quality of the production of data, the method by which it's arriving there. So finally, I think AI expands the very definition of data quality. We move from asking, is the data valid, i.e. the binary choice, is this correct or is it not correct? But more, is the data plausible? What we're adding to that data aspect is, does this make sense? And that's an ability that AI gives us to do that has been very difficult for us to do before. And there's the case study with Equifax is kind of the opposite way around. Equifax in 2017 had a breach, and ignoring the fact of how the breach emerged in the first place, they gave a kind of defensive posture to say, well, actually, the reason we didn't spot it was we didn't have enough detection that looked for things that were unusual. It was more of what we were looking for was usual patterns, predefined patterns. The anomalous, the looking at data and saying, well, why would someone do that? Why would that be accessed in that way? Why would this go with that? Was something that they said they didn't have. And therefore, that's a thing that AI can provide. It can give that plausibility to those static things that static rules actually miss. So, the dirty data, or the next major application of AI is not particularly cleansing data, but creating it. So AI can be trained on your real world data to create an entirely new synthetic data set that looks, feels, and means the same as the original. It's powerful for a number of reasons. One, it overcomes data scarcity. It balances imbalanced data sets, like augmenting rare fraud events. It augments data with new scenarios. And most critically, it preserves privacy. Data generated is artificial and therefore creates or contains no real personal information. What this leads to is a critical debate. Can you train generative AI, or indeed the machine learning parts of AI, on dirty data? We've all heard the garbage in, garbage out. With AI, it's a bit more nuanced. If your goal is robustness, creating more variations of a known pattern, generative AI is very effective. If your goal is novelty or bias correction, generative AI is very dangerous. It cannot invent the fair outcome that is never seen. So we have to kind of step back into AI as, whilst we say we're not looking at specific training, the data that it's using and the knowledge that it derives from that is very important. What it means when you look at the data in the context of AI is that AI will amplify the quirks and biases of a few dirty data examples it was trained on. The principle of amplification is the root of the bias laundering risk that we'll talk about a bit later. But there is a statement that I make quite a lot, and hopefully this is reassuring to you as data management people, that AI can't exist without data. Data can exist without AI. And in fact, when we talk about AI, we talk about a kind of multifaceted thing. If we look at machine learning predates what we would call AI now. And I actually looked up when the first chatbot was actually created. And would you believe it was in 1964? And it was actually IBM, in a kind of precursor to Deep Blue and things like that, actually started thinking about these things. So our thinking about machines having capability has existed for quite some time. What has changed is accessibility to it enormously. You can get computing power. The world was opened up. And the large language models, the interface, the ability to talk with these things is quite profound. But sitting behind that, ultimately, is something that is ingesting data and trying to interpret it. It is admittedly doing this in an increasingly more sophisticated way, but the data quality, the garbage in, garbage out, becomes even more important when you're going to rely on this to make decisions for you. So let's move quickly on to pillar 2. the management of structured sensitive data. We must begin by dismantling the core fallacy that plagues many data strategies, the quest for connectable anonymous data. This is kind of an oxymoron. By definition, truly anonymous data is not connectable to the individual. The objective we're trying to create really is privacy preserving connectable data. Now, just to put that into context, if I have a mass of medical information from numerous sources, then actually what I want to be able to do is connect those data sources together to give me a bigger picture. The challenge is, how do I do that without identifying the person? The onward challenge of that, because we talk about, like, well, let's take their name and their address and identify all the information out, is that AI is very, very good at picking up nuances that aren't related to those bits of data that you'd think would be the identifiable parts. And I'll give you an example, and the data is very important. Amazon used essentially some early AI back in 2019 to do recruitment. It went through the recruitment process and then looked at the results, and it found that it always favoured male rather than female candidates. And they looked at this, they looked at bias, they looked at how we can deal with this. They took out some of the things that they thought might identify whether it was a male or a female person, but they were unsuccessful. They couldn't understand how it was connecting data together to derive the fact that this was male or female and then applying a bias to it. So they actually had to abandon the whole thing just because they couldn't figure it out. And we've all heard the examples of AI stitching data together, that it doesn't necessarily follow through that we go through the same thought process, where it looks at buying patterns. And then there was a particular case in the US where it assumed that a young girl was pregnant, and not because of anything that she bought, and this was in Walmart, that was related to pregnancy, but it was largely related to the fact that she bought a bigger handbag. That was an indicator that they said, okay, that increases the likelihood in this scenario. So what we've got is, not only are we looking now at data that we hold ourselves and how we make that cleaner, but what escapes out into the outside world then becomes part of a much bigger model that is going to infer things from it. And we have to therefore be more mindful about how AI will look at something and how it might interpret data, particularly without a context. In the Isle of Man very recently, the Isle of Man published what they call the Isle of Man in Numbers 2025. And what they did was kind of dump a PDF into the public sphere with a whole load of numbers in it, statistics. But they were over a range of 5 years, from a census that was in 2021 to employment data that was in 2025. So if you took that publicly available information and put it into AI and said, what's the state of the Isle of Man? Then it came up with a whole load of stuff. Half of it was right, and half of it, because it had no context, it essentially made up along the way. It tried to fill in the gaps. Unfortunately, one thing that AI doesn't do very well is admit that it doesn't know. It always tries to achieve a result. So let's be very precise. Anonymization is the irreversible removal of identifiers. If done correctly, it's no longer personal data, but this destroys data utility because you can't connect together the data that you do want to connect together. Pseudonymization, terribly hard word to say, I wish they'd come up with a smaller one, is a reversible technique. It replaces PII with a token. Because re-identification is possible with a separate key, it's still personal data under GDPR inside the context where the two things are held, i.e. the key and the data, but it preserves high utility. And one thing to get out of the way, encryption is a security measure, not a privacy measure. The utility for data is zero until it's decrypted. You have to decrypt it to use it, although there are some techniques that can deal with that, which I'll touch on later on. So for connectable data, two primary architectures exist. One is the honest broker. This is a federated trust model, and it does get referred to here a few times. N3C was actually the sharing of medical data in the US. It stands for the National COVID Cohort Collaborative. So now you know why they call it N3C. And they use this federated model for hospitals to send clinical data to a data enclave, and then send tokens to a separate honest broker. This broker matches those tokens and sends a new match ID to the enclave, creates a segregation of duties. Model 2, much more complicated, is SMPC, which is secure multi-party computation. And it's the zero trust gold standard. It has some analogies to blockchain in some ways. It eliminates the need for an honest broker by using cryptography to allow parties to compute a joint result. For instance, find the intersection of our lists without ever sharing their data with one another. So this presents a clear strategic trade-off. Honest broker model is scalable, flexible, current industry standard. It's only con as it requires a trusted third party. And that's where I'll very, very briefly mention the work we've been doing in the Isle of Man, which is about creating corporate structures that could be those trusted third parties. Work around data asset foundations, having a whole set of requirements about holding data. And of course, if we look at SMPC, it's the gold standard of privacy as it requires no trust, but it has an extremely high computational cost. It's slower and far less flexible. Kind of going back to relational databases and normal forms, the reason we did that back then, structure data in a particular way and remove duplication, etc., was to make processing more efficient because processing was limited. Of course, that's not the motivation anymore. We have virtually unlimited processing capability. So now our ability to do certain things is not constrained by the computational power. It's actually the computational power is an adversary that we have to look at. AI can do bad things as well as good. Therefore, we're almost in a computational race to do the most sophisticated things to defend against stuff that we're not clear about. Pillar 3, proven case studies. Healthcare, we talked about these ambient voice assistants in live in clinics, particularly in the US. The honest broker model used in N3C and various other things. And believe it or not, the European Dental Register is done that way as well. I didn't know it existed until I looked at this. So we're all safe in the knowledge that there is shared data about teeth in the EU. In finance, we use synthetic data to train fraud models. More cleverly, they train models on safe synthetic data in the cloud, then bring the trained model back on premise to run on their real sensitive data, overcoming regulatory hurdles. And it proves in this sense that the honest broker is reusable, industry-spanning architectural pattern. But this power creates risks. Classic threat is what's called the data mosaic effect. I've talked about this already. It's linking what is a supposedly anonymized thing to data that does create that ID. There's a public example of a Netflix data set that when looking at what people looked at was merged with IMDb ratings, which did have people associated with them. And therefore they were able to re-identify those people in Netflix. AI also has this profiling capability. So a hostile AI can learn your unique identifying fingerprint from data alone, and without the personal data being there. It can figure out what you do because of the wealth of data that's available to it. And therefore, our clear sense of this is what is personally identifiable information is now becoming much more blurred. So it creates a dangerous paradox. The very data utility that pseudonymization preserves for friendly analysis is the exact same pattern hostile AI exploits to identify you. It shatters that kind of false sense of security of simple hashing. So a second critical risk is bias laundering. As we've established in Pillar 1, AI amplifies the bias in its training data. The bias laundering risk is the synthesis of two facts. Generative AI amplifies bias, and its purpose is to create a privacy-safe proxy. The result is a new asset that is privacy-safe but structurally biased. The organization trains a model that is on this laundered asset, and the underlying systemic bias is now even more difficult to detect and to challenge. So, conflict resolves into the central thesis of what we're talking about, the AI-driven data fabric, the AI duality. AI is fundamentally an amplification engine. Look at the data privacy paradox. AI is the threat. Its profiling attacks breaks in pseudonymization, but it's also the solution. Its NLP capabilities are the only way to enable privacy at scale, particularly in unstructured text. The same for the quality paradox. AI is the threat. It amplifies bias, but also it's the solution. It's the only tool that can cleanse and structure that same dirty data. This duality is the central managerial challenge. So my final pillar, and I will get there. I'm catching up, Ed. My final pillar provides the strategic solution to this duality, or at least a potential one to think about. First, for unstructured data, adopt a detect and restructure model. Use machine learning to detect problems and LLMs to restructure free text into usable assets. Secondly, for synthetic data, treat it as high risk, high reward. Green light it for model robustness, but be extremely cautious about bias laundering. Mandate independent bias testing. And that's not an easy thing to do, believe me, but people are moving towards that. Third, for structured data, adopt a zero trust data model. This is the only logical response to the dangerous paradox. Tier your policy, use the honest broker model for trusted collaboration, but escalate to SMPC for zero trust partners and differential privacy for public release. Now, I just want you to think about something carefully here, that AI in itself can be told what to do. AI largely in models that are used at the moment is unfettered. Go and think about this yourself. But it's quite feasible to create private AI models that have very specific focused bias built into them, the positive bias. So if you're looking at your honest broker, then it is perfectly plausible for a piece of AI to be that honest broker. Because it has no vested interest. It will do what it is told if it's told to do those things properly. But that kind of needs to be done by somebody outside. But if you're looking at pseudonymization, for example, a third party, an AI body and agents associated with that, could hold that linking information, and it could provide to you suitable information for you to answer the questions that you want without exposing the underlying privacy underneath. Now, there are various things, and I'll mention them in the paper, various parties that are working on exactly that. And that's a very interesting area to go towards. So, future outlook suggests that actually there are federated ways of doing this. There are ways of thinking about it, but there are things on the horizon. One is federating learning, which is move the model, not the data. So the questions that people ask come to your data rather than the data going to the people who are asking the questions. And this avoids you leaking particularly personal information. And then the one, again, I hate pronouncing, fully homomorphic encryption. And you have to go and research this yourself, which actually allows you to do queries on data whilst it's still encrypted. And you have to bend your head around this. This is a bit like quantum computing. You have to read the books. But ultimately, that could solve the problem, but it's nowhere near where we sit at the moment. So that's me. As I said, what I was trying to do was Just bend your mind, open up a little. There'll be more detail in the paper I'll send through later, but totally open to any questions.
Thanks very much, Kurt. I'm going to
stop the sharing. There you go. Oh, I've lost you, Ed.
Can you hear me?
I can, lots of times. So have we got any here?
Yeah.
So if I can answer a few of the things, there's a few statements here that are actually right. So they are on the slides, PPRL and SMPC, but worth looking up, worth having a read through as to what those things actually are. So first question I've got here is, while AI is getting more accessible, does this mean the energy needed to power AI centers is getting cheaper too? I think there's kind of a stage process there. It's certainly true that AI is consuming a lot of power because the computational capacity is just making that happen. I have seen some statistics that say that you know, the amount of power that's being required is going up exponentially, whereas I think there was something actually quite small. Data centers in places like the UK only occupied about 5% of the usable power. That's going to increase substantially. I think as time goes forward, and as people start looking at this in a slightly greener way, the answer is not, are we going to use less power, or are we going to use more power by using AI, but where's that power going to come from? And certainly in the UK, the use of renewables means that actually it's green power. I think it's inevitable that we ultimately are going to use more power over time, but we have to be more cognizant of its provenance, where it comes from. I do say that what's happened over a number of years, I'll kind of go back to my previous experience. Back in the day, we used to have to code things to be efficient because we didn't have the computational power to throw at it. That's almost a skill that's been lost. And I think it's one that should be come back to the fore, that we should make people think when they're building things, how do I do this efficiently, rather than just throw power at it to solve the problem. AI is most definitely in that category. I won't answer the question about an echo. Sounds like every society will have a need for honest brokers. So I mentioned the fact that honest brokers are required. If you look at the EU, they have got something, a term they call data intermediaries, and those data intermediaries, I think, are intended to be honest brokers in lots of different ways, not specifically this one at the moment. In the Isle of Man, what we've done is have taken a step to create a corporate entity that is someone who has to look after data and steward it correctly as part of their corporate obligations. And I think that will become prevalent elsewhere. Elsewhere, they use trusts and things to do that. In the Isle of Man, we're using foundations as the basis for it. But there will become, I do believe, and that's why we kind of engineered something in the Isle of Man to do this, a need for third parties to guarantee in some manner honest broking, stewardship, data quality, transparency. So particularly when you get into personal information, the increased need, I believe, for organizations who are using data to be honest about what they're doing with that data and to make that visible to people who are supplying it, breaks that lock of people not wanting to put data into the data space, which is ultimately beneficial for us all. But if you can't trust the people who are doing it, then you're not going to participate in that. Let me go down and look at this one. Mate, can you have a copy of the slides? That's up to Ed. Yeah, but I'm sure the answer is yes. It's fine with me. Computational unlimited compared with the 80s. Cluster environment. Yeah. And absolutely, you should. If we all hold people to account who are in the supply chain, if we all ask the questions, that's the whole kind of purpose of things like ESG at the moment, where you're looking at the onward implications of what you do. The more people ask for questions like that, the more suppliers are going to pay attention, and the more they're going to look at models which help the environment. That's an opinion rather than anything else. Yeah. So from Emil, find more watchdogs organizations arise in different ways that AI can work, which then points me to other questions. How can one regulate neural networks where that in itself is a black box? There is a theory here that, and again, it's a theory, that it's bias and the neural networks that are associated with them, the method by which you do that, there are elements of that could be a usable black box. So when we talk about an honest broker, let's give an example. You could say that I want AI to be used, and I want it specifically to have a positive bias towards ESG principles or the environment or something like that. Now, actually, if we're in an ideal world, people outside of the LLMs would build those black boxes and plug them in and ultimately say that this AI is using this certified black box model from which it's deriving its bias. Therefore, it is biased in this particular way. That doesn't exist at the moment, but it has every potential to if some regulated third parties, people who are certifying those, which weren't based around the profit motive of LLMs, came to the fore. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know, but that would be my ideal world. Thinking more broadly from Daniel, is there any sight of LLMs that can reason symbolically or numerically rather than words and tokens? There appears to be an inherent limit to the current AI. Yes, actually. Not sure of the exact specific examples that you're looking at, but if you look at genomics, for example, actually there's some very sophisticated models that AI in its generality are looking at that is about atomic patterns. So that there is obviously an inherent capability to model things. I think one of the things that happens with AI, and it's kind of what happens with all of us, and we do this a lot in our IT world, is we bundle a whole load of things together. And there are particular reasons why we do that. If you look at crypto is actually a multifaceted thing. It isn't one thing at all, but it was useful to bundle it together, particularly for investors at the time when people were coming in. AI is in that category. It's a number of different things. The churning of data is very different to the generative things that we use in chats, which is very different to the agentic AI, which is very different to the machine learning part of AI. So I think AI is overdue for a splitting out of all the different things it can do in different ways, rather than just being under a single badge. And fundamentally, I think there is a strain of AI that is trying to replicate a human. And there are strains of AI that aren't doing that. They're there to augment learning or capabilities or make things faster. And I think we need to start building that out in a technical sense to say which is which, why you do one, because they have totally different morals and totally different risks, totally different forms of regulation behind the different ones. AI is not one thing, it is many, many things. So another one here. every day I get badgered by the LLM I use to share stuff so it can help me. Is this not the biggest risk to my privacy? Depends what you're sharing, really. In every chat that you have will have some form of retaining data. So it gets smarter about the way that it interacts with you. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's sharing anything with anybody else. However, it is tuning itself to you. And you have to, again, be aware of the distinction, what goes out into the public sphere and what gets smarter for my knowledge. And there's much, much simpler precedents for that. The fact that we use or allow cookies and things like that. It's allowing it to respond in a much more customized way. But that doesn't mean it's going to share that data with the entire model. That is obviously a big risk. And there was a particular case. There was a company in Gibraltar actually, and they were distraught because their whole security model was available using ChatGPT, and they went, "How can this have happened?" And it turns out one of their network engineers had put their whole model in to say, "How can I make this better?" And their question then was, "Well, how do we get it off?" And the answer was, "You can't, because we don't actually know where it is anymore. The only thing you can do is rebuild your network in a completely different way, so it's not valid anymore." And that's the thing that we have to look at in terms of privacy going forward. Do you see standards such as ISO 27001 gaining traction in this domain? I think there are some new ones, and apologies, I'll pick it out and send it through to you, but there are some new ISO standards. So, sorry, there you go. You've answered the question. I was going to say 27001 isn't the one, 42001. I think it will. I think a lot of this stuff comes from the user end. When you're looking at, do people deploy security standards? Let's go back to that without looking at AI. Why do people do it? Well, ultimately, they do it because inherently they want someone to trust what they're doing. And that someone may be internally. So internally, you can demonstrate that you're meeting particular standards that are derived elsewhere. You're not marking your own homework, so to speak. It can be for things like insurance. Bear in mind that if you deploy AI as an agent, you are still liable for what it does as a company because you deployed the agent. You can't. I've seen people try to do this, but there is not a defense that says, I don't know what AI came up with because it does it by itself independently. You are responsible for what it does. So looking at those standards and saying, well, there's a defensible means that we took all reasonable steps to ensure this is what those can do. And then finally, there's the customers. Customers need to trust you. What do they use to do that? Well, in some cases, they will look at particular standards. And the same applies to suppliers where you're sharing data. They'll look at those things and say, have they applied these things? Have they taken reasonable measures? Or are they doing this all on the fly? New ISO certificate for data quality specifically for AI. I think, again, I'll go back to my previous answer. What is AI? I think AI is a lot of things. And I think certainly it wouldn't be possible, as far as I could see, to have one ISO certificate for AI in general, because it's too diverse. Specific parts of it, and looking at the kind of risk-based approach of regulation that the EU are certainly doing, where it puts things into various categories. If you're looking at a high-risk category, then I think actually some standard that is associated with that, because it's largely related around healthcare data and private information, should be viable. I won't answer the one about the BCS.
Kurt?
Yeah.
I was hoping
Cool.
it's not going to work.
Can anybody hear me? No. Yes, that was good.
I've switched my microphone off, Ed, so perhaps that helps.
Can you hear me now, Kurt?
I can.
Yeah, all right. Well, listen, thanks very much for that presentation. Brilliant. And I love the way you went through the questions without my help. Yeah, interesting, isn't it, to take that perspective. There's a lot of hype around AI, and I like the way you sort of broke that down and put it into the context of what we're trying to do is in the data world. So thanks very much for that. And for all those people, we will be sharing the slides. We're recording the event here, so we'll be able to put that onto the BCS DMSG webpage, which you just type in BCS DMSG, it takes you straight there. And Kurt, you're going to share a paper with us as well.
Yeah, I'll do that later on today.
So yeah, thanks very much, Kurt. We're going to go into the rest of the AGM, which you're welcome to stay for, Kurt, or if you've had enough, then you're welcome to leave too. But thanks so much for the presentation.
No, I'll stay if you don't mind, Ed. I probably should join this special interest group, to be honest.
I think you should.
Yeah. You should.
Yeah, we're building some momentum. Right. So I'm going to start sharing my slide. We've got another sort of half an hour or so. I crave your indulgence for that. Let's go here. Okay, I'm going to put this onto. How's that looking? Yeah, it turns around back. Do you want to turn your video off, Kurt? There you go. Yeah. Right. So yeah. So that's our guest presentation. I'm just going to do a quick summary of what happened in 2025. First of all, just a reminder of what the scope is for the BCS DMSG. The BCS is a wonderful organisation, the Chartered Institute for IT. I probably don't need to tell you that, but I know a lot of people on the call are not necessarily members. Data is a huge topic. We try to cover that from a perspective of the things you see there on that list. It's a list that's ever expanding. We try to always take it back to the practicalities of how data is there to support the business, support the organisation. And our aim is to help individuals, groups, sort of navigate through data by sharing and networking and being able to support people for careers in data. So one of the things that we do for that, we do a series of presentations. So here are some of the presentations we've had this year. We normally do about three presentations every half year or so. So we normally have about 6 or 7 webinars. This year we didn't have so many. And one of the reasons for that was 2 things. First of all, we surveyed our members in spring, and we're all volunteers here. That took up quite a bit of our time. We also had quite a change in the committee. I'll introduce the committee in a moment. The committee, it's important that the committee is active. It's important that the members of the committee are able to stick their hands up and help out where necessary. Otherwise, it all boils down to myself and the vice chair here, Sayini, who's sitting next to me. So you know, we do have an active committee now, and but there are always changes. People's roles change. People have different challenges, and you know, they spend a couple of years and then move on and do something else. So if anybody's interested in joining, then the thing to do is to connect to us. If you've got some ideas about how you want to see data at the BCS going forward, we're really interested to hear those ideas. So this is what we did in 2025. The presentations for those are the videos. If they're not there yet, will be on our website. The Thomas Kerry Wilson one actually was a joint event with DAMA UK. So it's actually being shared by DAMA UK, that particular one. And DAMA UK is a close ally of ours in the world of data management. For those people who are in this, will recognise what they bring to the table as well. And for 2026, we'll be doing some more joint events with DAMA UK. The note there at the bottom, there's a BCS groups review at the moment for those who are not in the committees or not necessarily so active in BCS. There's been a change in management, and there are, I'm not say hundreds, there may be over 100 different groups, regional groups, specialist groups, groups dedicated to particular work sectors like the NHS, for example. And you know, what we're all looking for is a bit more coordination between those groups and a bit more sharing going on. So, like for example, if you imagine there's an AI group, then how does the data group work with the AI group? How does the data group work with the women's group? How does the data group work with open standards group? You know, some of these conversations are ongoing, and we hope that collaboration is going to be increasingly facilitated by the reorganisation. So reorganisation is going on, and we expect that we'll be producing results sometime in Q1. And
yours this is AGM.
Yeah. Yeah. Just in time. So one of the things we've been doing as a result of our talk about the survey. Yeah, the survey key points. So what we found out from our survey was that from our responses at least, that 50% of the people who responded were in London or the South East. And the reason we asked that question is because we want to know whether we do more face-to-face meetings or whether we do more virtual meetings. I'm a big fan of virtual meetings. I've become a big fan of virtual meetings because of the inclusivity of it. There's sort of tools you can use to support those things, like whiteboarding, for example. It means that people can tap in for an hour without having to travel, but there's no substitute for face-to-face. So it's great when you can get people face-to-face. So knowing where our people are, knowing where our members are, where the interest is, we can sort of try and make sure that we're doing what we need to do to support the community. Primary industries, consulting, government, non-profit, education were the four key things that came up. There was a whole range of other industries. I have to hold my hand up there that some of the data that we used could have been interpreted in different ways. So you know, we've got a lot of duplication there, perhaps. But nevertheless, you know, what was the most important thing we found out was the experience level. We found out that 86% of our respondees were more senior. So, and you know, obviously people like myself who've been around a few years, we have experience to share. We're still active in the business, but obviously we need to make sure there's a wider range of experience in the team. So what we've done, we made a particular focus this year on early careers, and the slide to support that in a moment. And then we asked about the recognised data challenges. So what are the things that organisations, individuals want to hear about, so that they can take that back? You know, if you're a data management consultant, or if you're working in data within a particular organisation, what are the things you want to hear from us? Like we just heard from Kurt, the experience, you know, give you some ideas, give you some insight, give you some, kick off some thoughts that you can then take back to your organisation to show that you know you're on top of the latest and greatest within the data world. So these are the topics that came up. AI, as we just heard, is an ongoing topic. People AI in front of anything, then all of a sudden you get more interest from people. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what AI is and what AI isn't, and we heard from Kurt to try and demystify some of that. Data culture, what does that mean? The way that an organisation approaches data, people's sense of responsibility everybody who works in an organisation touches data and has an impact on the outcomes that you generate from data, has an impact on the quality. From people collecting data, if you're working in a utility in the street, and collecting data, the temptation is just to fill in the least amount possible just to move on in the process. The same with sales introductions. Every time you introduce false data into a system, it stays there for a very long time and propagates throughout the whole data ecosystem. So, having a good understanding of what data means and as a data culture can have a big impact on an organisation. I'm not going to go through the rest in that, but you can see there some of the things that were raised. So I'll focus on early careers. Serena, did you want to just chat us through this page? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Saini's been working with our early careers folks.
Hi, everyone. So currently only about 4% of our members are at the early stage of their career. So that's about 3 to 5 years within data IT. So what we're taking on is trying to build in a pipeline of some sort, having a commitment to those within early careers. So we're going to invest in that next generation by attending university fairs that are related to data and IT, speaking more about what the data management specialist group is at these fairs, showcasing presentations from PhD students, master's students. We've had some questions about scheduling events like these at accessible times. So sometimes for a university student or even a person who's just started a role as a graduate, they're not able to attend the lunchtime session. Maybe they want to attend an evening or a weekend or something like that. So that's something we want to discuss. And then also there's the option for mentoring or shadowing. As Ed just mentioned, quite a few of us have been in the industry for a few years. We have some knowledge we can pass on. So it would be good if maybe some of these people can either virtually or in person shadow us, or even we can pass on some of that knowledge that we have from when we started out, and maybe they can avoid some of the pitfalls that we've gone through. So our vision for this is just to build this pipeline of future leaders, but it's not just for the data management specialist group, it's for the BCS as a whole, because we've also found out, as Ed mentioned, with the review that's happening for all the groups, we're finding out that quite a few of the groups are also having the problem with early careers as a focus also. So we're realizing it's not just us.
Yeah, it's a great area for collaboration, that, isn't it? Certainly, yeah. Thank you.
No worries.
So yeah, AGM, so it wouldn't be complete without a treasurer's report. One of the advantages of doing everything virtually is that we have no expenditure and no income. So we are trying to change that a little bit. We're looking for a little bit of money to support our early careers activity, but don't tell anybody that. Just to introduce the committee here and say thanks to the people listed on here. So I'm the chair, vice chair. You just heard from Saini. Thanks very much for that, Saini. Taking on the responsibility for helping out with early careers. Treasurer Terry, we keep him busy by not spending any money. Jagdev works at Birmingham City University and has been really helpful with the early career stuff, as well as she's our academic liaison and diversity and inclusions officer. We've taken on 2 early careers co-optees, Mercatus and Mitra, who are recent graduates in master's graduates. Their profiles are on our website. We just asked them to join for a year just to give us their perspective. What are the things that are important to them in starting their careers? How do we reach the sort of student body, if you like, and make them aware of what's happening with the BCS and what the value is of joining? So thanks for those guys for joining us. And then we're supported by a wonderful team of Ashish, Jonathan, Paul, Anita, Dan, and Andres, who, as I mentioned before, increasingly involved and active in this committee. We've probably got room for 1 or 2 more if anybody's interested. So if people are interested in joining the group, we wouldn't give you any specific responsibilities initially, but the opportunities are to host webinars, to identify topics, bring in people who you've been working with, who might have expertise in a particular area that we're interested in. So, yeah, if you're interested in joining up, then please get in touch. Okay, so plans for next year. A couple of things I've got here then. We are going to be doing a conference with EDMA UK. So we've had a few conferences with them in the past. The last two conferences have been virtual, where we've done them over a week with a presentation in the morning, a presentation in the afternoon. So we did one on the theme of open data comes of age. I was working for the Open Data Institute at the time, and it was 10 years after the Open Data Institute was instituted, and it seemed like an appropriate time to work out, you know, what impact open data had, open and shared data had. So that was the theme for that one. Then we had a conference in diversity in data. We wanted to look at what does it mean to what are the roles in data, how are the different career paths into data. It's not something you necessarily go to university to do a course in, you know, how to be a data manager, but we end up in that role, and we looked at that from a number of different perspectives. Now, what we're intending to do in 2026 is hybrid. So hybrid has its own challenges, as we heard from the echo on the call earlier today. But we're hoping to do that based in this office here, the Liverpool Street office of the BCS, and we'll try and manage the virtual aspects of that so that we increase inclusivity. So we're looking at a topic for that. We've got a couple of ideas, but we're interested in your views, and if we get to the whiteboarding session, you know, please post on some ideas there. By the way, I did share the link to a Miro board, and we'll go to that in a moment. If you want to try and connect to that, if any challenges with that, then let me know. That should be in the chat. If you joined after that was shared, it might not be available to you. So do you mind just going back in and copying that and posting it again?
Yeah.
At the top. Yeah. So that'll be a one-day conference. We're looking for sponsorship to provide us with a bit of sustenance, food and drinks while we're doing that. And it will be here, but also virtually. One of the topics of interest, we're always looking to get your views on what we want to do. So we've got a Miro board. I don't know if you can connect to that. I'm going to pull it up on here in a moment. But we're looking to see what the topics of interest are. We're also interested in just general comments. So there's a space there for putting general comments about, you know, what sort of time is the best for events. Any other comments or suggestions? Any feedback for Kurt on his presentation? We'll go to the Miro board and see what happens. How do I share that? I see some people in there already. I'm going to try and work out how to share. Yeah. Share. Okay, there we go. So, last 10 minutes. It'd be really great if you just grab a couple of stickies and put them on there. We're looking at what topics would you like to hear about. Don't need to be necessarily in those categories, but you know, let's try to break it down a little bit. Any feedback, comments, or questions for us and the team? Any other suggestions? Any feedback for Kurt and the AI-driven data fabric that we heard about? And then, what about a conference? What are the topics that you would like to see in the conference? So for those in the room, you can write down on here, or you can shout things out, or you can just sit there and
Contemplate.
contemplate. Yeah.
Also, how long would the mural be open? Maybe.
Yeah, we'll leave the mural open as well. So what I'll do is, good point actually. I'll share the link for the mural board. Where did I put that? I'll put that on the LinkedIn. No, I won't put it on the LinkedIn page. I'll put it on the email distribution list if you're on the email distribution list, and I'll leave this open for a while so that we can get more comments on that. So if you don't mind, just spend the next 5 minutes just posting on here, and then we'll have a quick look, and then we'll wrap up. I'm going to mute myself for a second and chat to the folks. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your input here. We had a great chat here in the room about preserving IP, particularly in the music industry, which sounds like a great topic. I've added that onto the board. Yeah, I'm just going to go through and just look at what we've got here. I'm going to leave the board open for a while. So if you've got the link, you'll be able to add to that. So make sure you get a copy, because obviously when you close the Zoom down, that's going to disappear. But if you carry on adding to this, it'll be really helpful. There's no limit to really the different topics, and actually, if you find yourself supporting something that's already on there, then you can indicate that as well, just to give us a bit of an indication that that's an important idea. So, democratizing access to data, data stewards, and sustaining engagement. That's a really tricky one, that, isn't it? The data culture one. Data stewards is a fascinating topic. I've been trying to implement data stewardship in many organisations, and it happens by a nudge rather than overnight. You've got to kind of work towards that really with the people who are more aligned to that kind of role and recognise that. But you've got to do it to make it sustainable is really quite tricky. Yeah, so that's a good one. Non-data people working with data. That's said before. Everybody in the organisation touches data. They need to have a good understanding of the impact that they have. So it's some kind of it's almost like a change management idea, isn't it? To move people along and make them more savvy about the impact of their activities on the data outcomes. Yeah. Some good stuff on technology, tools, and architecture there. Getting into the acronyms there, but data quality tools, Power BI, Purview will be a good one. Few years back, if I'd have said data governance to somebody, it would have been a series of processes. It would have been a series of roles and responsibilities. It would have been in terms of reference for a group to meet and discuss data. But data governance these days is much more focused on tools and technology, and which kind of can help to make it more sustainable, but it can also put people off because of the cost of implementation for all that. But that'd be a really good topic. ERP management. Yeah, I mean, ERP management, that speaks to me, so that in a way that these are the key, ERPs are generally the key processes in an organisation. So if you need to focus on anything within an organisation, you can't do all the data. There's too much of it. It's constantly changing. But if you want to focus, then focusing on the key business processes in an organisation is the way to go. And in the ERP, where you've got the tools to preserve good quality data as well, is a good way to do that. Somebody's created a really big square there. Make that smaller. There you go. Okay, so yeah, please carry on adding to this. Let's just have a quick look at the conference here. Data teams, central hideout, yeah, there you go. That would be a great conference. Insight into the different ISOs around data. I think that will be a webinar. I don't know if we could do a whole week doing that. I think it would, for the specialists, I suppose, but important that our standards are vitally data.
Also, with ISOs, it depends on what industry, because I know construction has their industry. It's ISO for data, finance has their own, credit cards have their own. So if the person who put that down can put which industry you're interested in, maybe, or if it's in general, please.
There you go, thank you. Will AI make data managers redundant finally? Are we, is that a wish? I mean, all these tools change the way we do our business, but the business still stays the same. Okay, other suggestions there, feedback, Kurt. Yeah, cool. I'm going to stop it there and let everybody disappear. I just want to say is thanks very much for everybody for attending. Once again, thanks to Kurt for such an insightful presentation. The committee will start to meet again in January. We're going to have the festive break off, and you'll see from us via LinkedIn and via the email distribution list what topics and presentations we've got lined up for the next year. And we'll hopefully be addressing some of the key challenges there that were reported on this whiteboard. Like I said, I'll keep that open, so any further ideas always welcome. If someone wants to volunteer to do a presentation, if they know somebody who's a great speaker or has got a topic of interest, then we're always interested in that. Let's keep it moving, let's keep it dynamic. Okay, well, thanks very much for your time. I'm going to close it down there. Thanks for evening, and thanks again to Kurt. So have a great festive break, and we'll be back again in the new year.